Coming up next is the Dr. Kim Taylor Show. Here's your chance to talk about what matters to you. Although you'll receive helpful advice from Dr. Kim, remember this is not to be construed as any form of psychotherapy, diagnosis or treatment, and cannot replace a therapeutic relationship with a mental health professional. You can reach Dr. Kim by calling 564-1290 or 866-564-1290. You can also listen live on the internet at drkimtaylorshow.com. Now, here's Dr. Kim.
For the last 2 decades, the slogan of choice for sexual assault prevention efforts was "No means no." While the intent was good, the message has been ineffective. And as the epidemic of campus sexual violence has risen into the national spotlights, efforts are now being made to change the dialogue and provide an even stronger message to students that consent is not the absence of a no, but the presence of a yes. In September, California Governor Jerry Brown signed legislation adopting the new policy, Yes Means Yes. This is requiring colleges and universities to adopt a new definition for consent when investigating sexual assault cases. And that definition of consent is now an affirmative, unambiguous, and conscious decision by each participant to engage in mutually agreed upon sexual activity. And the consent has to be ongoing throughout any sexual encounter. And if the student initiating the sexual encounter doesn't receive an enthusiastic yes, either verbally or physically, then there is no consent. And also, if the student is intoxicated or unconscious, there is no consent. This puts California in the position of being the first state to make such a definition of consent law, and hopefully it's going to lead the rest of the nation to adopt healthier standards when it comes to getting consent between sexual partners on college campuses. Do you know, this idea is rather simple. If you don't get consent, you don't have the right to proceed. The absence of a no is not enough. You have to ask, and only yes means yes. A lot of victim rights advocates continue to praise this idea of affirmative consent, and the momentum for the concept of yes means yes has recently gained traction. So I'm pleased to have as my guest State Senator HANNAH-BETH Jackson, who first introduced the legislation on yes means yes, and she's here to talk about how this is working. I will also be joined by BRIANA Conway, who is a victim advocacy specialist at CARE, which is the Campus Advocacy Resources and Education Center at UCSB. And then joining us will be KELSEY Brugger. She's a former student at UCSB and a current reporter for the independent newspaper here in Santa Barbara. So if any of you would like to call in, if you have a question or a comment or would just like to join in on the conversation, call today at 805-564-1290 or email me at drkim@drkimtaylorshow.com. So stay with me. You'll want to hear this show, and I'll be right back with my guests to get the conversation started.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290. You're listening to Dr. Kim Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or 866-564-1290. Tune into the rebroadcast Thursday evenings at 10 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Or download the past shows on iTunes or YouTube by going to drkimtaylorshow.com. Here now is Dr. Kim.
We are talking about the new law, Yes Means Yes, and it mandates that college campuses adopt a policy that specifies an affirmative yes for sexual activity to be consensual. And I'm here now with State Senator HANNAH-BETH Jackson, along with BRIANA Conway, who is a victim advocacy specialist at UCSB, and KELSEY Brugger. She is a UCSB graduate and a reporter for the Santa Barbara Independent. So thank you all for coming, and I'm really happy to have you here. I think it's really great that we're going to be talking about this.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do is to start with you, Senator Jackson, and really ask that there's now been quite a surge of support for this Yes Means Yes. What exactly was the purpose in getting this passed, and what do you hope that will happen with it?
Well, the purpose is to change the dialogue and the behavior and a culture that has allowed for far too many years people to go ahead and commit acts of rape because the standard basically was you had to say no. And we know that no means no didn't work, or silence wasn't no, and therefore people could go ahead and take advantage of others physically and sexually. So I introduced this bill with Senator Kevin De Leon this past year, and it was signed into law in September by the governor of California. We had been hearing from victims all over California and nationally that there had become a culture of rape on our college campuses, that 1 in 5 women during her college experience would be the victim of sexual assault. So the status quo was failing us. It was, in fact, serving perpetrators and failing victims, and it was clear that we needed a bold change. So we had been hearing stories of student sex offenders who were given no more than a slight warning by universities, sexual misconduct cases at universities that were never followed up upon, women being discouraged from proceeding, procedures that colleges were following that actually favored the perpetrators, and stories of victims, frankly, being so discouraged by the system that they didn't even see any point in coming forward and reporting these offenses. So we brought this bill. It was very clear that these rape victims suffer the same psychological harm as stranger rape victims, but college acquaintance rape victims face additional consequences. Many of them drop out of school, or if they stay, they might regularly face their attackers in class or the dorm or at campus events, and this, frankly, was just unacceptable.
So some people who are very concerned about this are really more concerned that it puts the burden of proof on the, let's call him the perpetrator, and that it means that that person must show that they got and took steps to be able to ascertain whether the person they're having sex with actually said yes. Does this put the burden of proof solely on the accused now?
Oh, absolutely not. First of all, the bill is really about prevention. The goal is to prevent sexual assaults by changing the culture and changing the behavior that people have in a dating relationship, to create a safer environment for all of our students. And that's when we'll know the bill has been a success. Under this law, all students are going to be educated about what yes means yes is during student orientations, and hopefully reinforced throughout the college experience as necessary. And that's where we give the colleges and universities a lot of leeway to create a program that's going to create this results. But when assaults do occur, students need to know that they can get help, and this legislation also requires that we provide resources for the physical and psychological harm that happens. But in a proceeding, this is going to give victims a fair shot at a fair hearing. Schools have to have a fair and reliable process so that students know when they report an assault, it's going to be handled fairly and judiciously. So we really want to change the culture on campus, moving from a culture of acceptance. Well, she didn't say no. Well, of course, she might have been unconscious. And we know in instances that we've heard about for a number of years, and as recently as yesterday on Wednesday at UCSB, UCSB, stories of how students are drugged, how they are given so much alcohol that they pass out. And of course, when you're unconscious, you can't say no. And sadly, there are far too many people think that, well, she didn't say no. She may have been unconscious, but no means no. And if she didn't say no, then I don't have any responsibility. So now we're focusing now that you have to say yes. And what we will see is when we have these proceedings and hearings, again, we can weigh both sides, but there has to have been an affirmative statement of consent. And essentially what we're trying to do is say that we have no excuses here. There will be a no excuse culture, no excuse for rape, no excuse for blaming the victim, and no excuse for not giving the victim the support they need.
Okay, so one has to give it and one has to receive this. Let's be clear that this law is intended to protect the college student and that this whole hookup culture and that it does exist on the campus. Have you heard of some of the reactions from the students about what the students think of having to stop, take a pause, break the flow is what I've heard, and to actually have to get an affirmative yes?
There are some people who believe that getting to yes is a very, very arousing kind of moment where, there is respect, there is acknowledgement, there is a desire to continue. And so, frankly, I suspect we will hear from some people that, this is ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is we have to change this culture. If 1 in 5 women is going to go through her college experience being victimized by sexual assault, it's really critical that we change the dynamic between people engaging in sexual conduct and that we emphasize the positive, which is yes, and not the negative, which is either find someone unconscious and have sexual conduct with an unconscious person. I mean, how romantic and how exciting could that be? I have no idea. But the fact is that this will change the culture, and what we have been hearing, particularly not only from women but from men as well, that this is a good thing.
Yes, and I think that, in fact, that what can be sexier than having your partner wanting you and saying yes, 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 now, now, now. I mean, that is probably the sexiest word that we have.
Well, it was mentioned to me that in the great novel Ulysses by James Joyce, the last paragraph is a paragraph that just that does end the novel in exactly that fashion. So let's shift the culture, let's change it, let's gain greater respect, let's listen to what our sexual partner is saying, and I think at that point, there is this hookup culture, but this is not something that we should be condoning just because couples may get together, may want to engage in sexual activity. Let's make sure that it is mutual.
Yes. Brianna, yes means yes. Has that become a part of the new conversation on college campuses?
So it's not technically new. The University of California has been educating with the yes means yes concept for a number of years. We work it into all of the prevention education and training that my office does at the CARE program. But yeah, so we are talking about it. Is it continuous? Just because I had consent last Tuesday doesn't mean I have it next Thursday. Mm-hmm. And, really kind of changing the way that we talk about things. The extremists, as the senator said, might take it as an awkward question. But we really truly find that not to be the case, that really actively engaging and enjoying your partner with an affirmative yes can really change the actual entire experience. So it's not necessarily a new conversation, but it is one that has been happening, and we're just really excited to have the legislation that we can work it into as much of the prevention education that we are doing as a college campus.
So what kind of a response are you getting from the students?
It's pretty positive. I think
both male and female?
Both male and female. In addition to engaging men on this issue, it's really important not to just take a preventative approach, but also engaging them as bystanders and really, stepping in and helping and intervening should they witness a situation. We follow bystander intervention in a number of our programs about distracting from a situation or delegating, maybe getting help, or directly going in and addressing and really helping someone that could possibly be in harm's way. which, are wonderful bystander tools that our college campus can utilize in a variety of different avenues as well.
Okay, we are going to take a short break, but I'll be right back, and we will be still talking about yes means yes.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290. You're listening to Dr. Kim Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or 866-564-1290. Tune into the rebroadcast Thursday evenings at 10 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Or download the past shows on iTunes or YouTube by going to drkimtaylorshow.com. Here now is Dr. Kim.
If you are just joining us, we are talking with State Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, a proponent of the new legislature, Yes Means Yes. It's to help curb sexual assaults on campuses throughout our state. I'm also joined by BRIANA Conway. She works with survivors of sexual assault at UCSB, and KELSEY Bruger, a reporter at the Independent, and also past student at UCSB. So, BRIANA, do most sexual assault victims blame themselves, and do they have a hard time prosecuting because they're worried that perhaps they were drinking, that it might have been more their fault?
So what we know about victims and disclosing of sexual abuse is really the number of barriers that a victim faces for coming forward. The list is endless, and that is even before even thinking about a formal reporting process. I would say I've been working with victims for about 5 years now, and absolutely, the amount of self-blame and shame that a victim feels is probably their number one barrier from seeking help in the first place. I think that the importance of this legislation, which will increase education and letting victims and survivors know that there are resources available, whether they are the confidential advocacy office and the services that my office provides, or other counseling and other referrals and things like that can help them get the support and really kind of process and undig all of that, deeply rooted self-blame that they are often experiencing. That this will be tremendously helpful in that.
Okay. And how is your school really trying to shift this broader rape culture that goes on that says that this is okay? Because they do see it within their videos and music. And how are you working to kind of shift that culture?
Sure. So, part of the Violence Against Women Act is mandatory education for all incoming freshmen and transfer students. Before students even step foot on our campus, they will hear from us at least twice, once during freshman orientation, through skits that are put on by their peers, as well as on an online training module, which is called Haven, and that's part of the alcohol.edu mandatory education that incoming freshmen and transfers have to receive. And then through a Gaucho FYI program, which is a 90-minute peer-facilitated in-person education. And it's going to cover sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, as well as those tangible bystander intervention tools that I talked about before. So really creating a campus culture where, we have each other's back and working to, keep safety for all, as well as, finding out about the resources and kind of the dynamics of sexual assault and perpetration behaviors and so forth.
Part of my question on this is that I believe that women are very much behind this and that we are a very powerful force. However, what's missing is the voice of men. So what are we going to do if the guys are not buying into this? Where are the men going to come from? And do you have a strong male presence that is speaking to the male students at your school?
From an advocate perspective, I will always say that it can be stronger. We work through a variety of other ongoing education programs, from the Green Dot Bystander Intervention to a 2-hour Care Connect training, which really acts encourages the students to act as liaisons from the student population, because we know that research says that survivors are often going to disclose to someone that they know, love, and trust before coming forward in a more official capacity. So really making sure that that initial point of contact is a really strong experience, and then that person can also refer them to the help and as well as respond sensitively so that that survivor doesn't clam up and stay quiet any longer. Other areas, awareness events and campaigns. We're working on the White House It's On Us campaign. Next week is a week of action that will be happening all campus long. From Monday through Thursday, we'll have a wall of action, really, engaging our campus community to take this pledge and to take a stand against sexual assault. And then we're going to have a rallying event on Friday at noon as well.
Do you think that this will also help for the bystanders? Because when you think about how this is happening, it's happening out in the open. It's during the parties. Do you think that it will help those who stand by and are watching this happen to perhaps step in and stop someone from proceeding if they know that the person is intoxicated or is not giving that yes?
I genuinely hope so. I do think that we are up against a barrier that college students aren't receiving this education earlier. They're not receiving
from parents, is what you're talking about.
From
Absolutely.
high school, from middle school age, not just healthy sexuality education, but consent education and healthy relationships. Oftentimes, we're working with a culture that has been acculturated to accept this or tolerate it or just not be fully informed until they get to the college campuses and are kind of hit with the hard truth and the facts that 1 in 5 women on college campuses are impacted by sexual assault.
Mm-hmm. But how many actually get reported? Do you know?
The statistics are challenging. I would say about 60% go unreported.
Mm-hmm.
My office, because we are a confidential resource, tend to be the center point for a lot of referrals. We're a safe space for and for a survivor to come in and really find out what all the options are, and not feel pressure and know that they are the expert in their own life to truly choose the avenue that is appropriate for them. And that's not just with reporting, that's also with exploring medical options or housing accommodations, academic accommodations, and things of that nature as well.
Okay, so this means that this law is very important. Senator Jackson, how is this going to be able to help the school officials who are trying to investigate that they will really be able to uphold the prosecution so that there is a consequence, that these young men start to see that these are not going to go unreported, and when they are reported, they are going to be followed through with?
Well, we have to remember these are administrative hearings at college versus a criminal prosecution. So to call it a prosecution, we have to be careful. Criminally, the law is still the same. You have to show proof beyond a reasonable doubt that there was non-consensual activity. But focusing on college campuses, I think the universities, and certainly the University of California, has gotten the message and has been very proactive in understanding that there have to be consequences, that the judicial process initiated at colleges has to result in significant consequences if someone is found to have, in fact, committed a rape or a sexual assault as defined as non-consensual, and consent being yes means yes. We're going to start seeing those happening with the change in the law, and we're going to see, I think, the universities recognizing that if someone is found to have, in fact, committed this offense, that there will be consequences including suspension and expulsion, which means a permanent expulsion from any University of California campus, that information will be on that person's transcript if they try to get into another college or university in the state of California. This, in other words, that the consequences are serious and they are long-lasting. None of this slap on the wrist, you might be asked to leave for a quarter or 2 quarters maybe, but that the university means business. And I think that will open people's eyes to the fact that this is serious and will be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm. And also that a survivor's silence and fear or blood alcohol content will not be used and held against that survivor, and that these cases will reach a fair adjudication process.
And I think that's huge, because once a victim, then they feel like just going through this system, they are re-victimized. And I think that's the crime that we really do to them, is that we don't believe them and we don't support them and we don't stop what's going on. Kelsey, you actually were able to talk to a lot of students while you did this article about sexual assault on the campus. What was it that you heard? What was their view about yes means yes?
In speaking with students, particularly about yes means yes, because I did mention it in my piece, I think at this point they were not super familiar with the law because it is new. That said, they were definitely interested in it. They definitely had questions, well, what does this mean? I definitely did hear some skepticism, does this mean that the government is going to be implementing laws that, affect behavior that's behind closed doors? And you get sort of this knee-jerk reaction that I, sort of had myself when I first started researching and reporting on this. But I think, in conversations I had with students working on this, there's an interest in this topic, and people, when the conversation, continued and the dialogue went on, people did start to see it as valuable, as important, and as useful.
Let me ask you, do you think that they were thinking it was a problem before all of this started to happen and the conversation started to happen about yes means yes? Do you think that there were a lot of students that were already concerned about what was happening? They just didn't really know how to talk about it, and people were not talking about it.
Absolutely. I think I reached out to several students, and some of them, a lot of them were pretty eager to talk to me. Some without disclosing their full name, perhaps. But what I heard time and time again is that they wanted to talk about it because this is a problem that they think is so common and that has happened maybe to them or happened to their friends. And it is something that, because we've seen so much media attention about this topic in the past year, that they did feel like they could come forward and share their story.
Okay. So bottom line through all of this, it is really about teaching mutual respect for others. So let's have a conversation about where should that all start, because you were saying that it's really almost too late once they get into college, that they've already have a certain mindset. So we also really not just need to be mandating a new law about yes means yes, but it sounds like we need to be starting the conversation for parents, and especially fathers or men who are role models to these young boys, about what is appropriate, what is okay and what is not okay to, number one, respect themselves, but number two, to respect women.
I think I did make a comment about wanting education to start earlier. I don't think that means we throw up our hands and stop. It's a continuous process. Mm-hmm. Even experts that are doing this work are constantly evolving and constantly, changing the ways in which we talk about these things. And what better population than the future leaders of our country, our college population, the millennials. I think that they really have a voice, and we're no longer having those rape myths of a assailant jumping out of a bush in a ski mask. We're changing the conversations for our future, that 90% of sexual assaults are acquaintance rape. Victims and perpetrators know one another for a period of at least 24 hours. And I think that those messagings is really happening on the college campus, and little by little changing the framework of the way things used to be thought about or talked about. And yes, engaging conversations across the lifespan as well.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to those who just want to be left alone to enjoy the college experience?
Well, that's that they may be enjoying the college experience, but they also have to know that their behaviors can have significant long-term consequences for others. And I think the word respect is critical here. I think also we have to redefine masculinity in our society. And it's very troublesome as we see this sort of macho culture, the violent culture, the conquest culture is just not acceptable or should not not be acceptable, that there should be a mutual respect among people and among the between the sexes, and for people in general. You know, some of the violence we see is in the gay and lesbian world or the transgender world, where and with those who don't approve of somebody else's lifestyle, trying to express their unhappiness by sexual conduct that is criminal, that is not acceptable in a society where we need to get along, where we need to coexist. And I think part of it needs to start at the earliest possible stages, teaching respect for oneself, redefining what makes a man, and as we again become more and more violent in the way we express ourselves, this creates a real problem. Now, we can't legislate everything. But we do need to recognize as a society it is important that we have these conversations. And if we haven't had them successfully by the college experience, as you pointed out, these are the future leaders of America. Our college students, our college graduates, and we need to make sure that they lead by example, and that we, those of us, the taxpayers who are funding their education, and the parents who are encouraging their education, and as a society in general, that they have that level of respect, which is what we want to see for the future of our families and our state and the world at large.
With that, we're going to take a quick break. I'm here with State Senator HANNAH-BETH Jackson, BRIANA Conway, and KELSEY Brugger. We'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290. You're listening to Dr. Kim Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or 866-564-1290. Tune into the rebroadcast Thursday evenings at 10 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Or download the past shows on iTunes or YouTube by going to drkimtaylorshow.com. Here now is Dr. Kim.
I am here with State Senator HANNAH-BETH Jackson and BRIANA Conway from UCSB and KELSEY Brugger, a reporter at The Independent. And we are talking about yes means yes. One of the conversations that, again, there are many, but one of the others that I think that we need to talk about is what to do about fraternities, where the whole message is about men going out and being men. How are you going to address that, and what is the message that you're sending to them?
Well, I think, one thing that I heard yesterday that was pretty interesting, there was a roundtable discussion at UCSB about this, about yes means yes, in part, and also just about this problem of sexual assaults on college campuses. And there was one fraternity brother who spoke a little bit about the mindset that young men have. It's cool to get laid, basically. And one thing that he said and was very adamant about, which I thought was very encouraging, was that at the beginning of parties he'll stand up and he'll talk to his frat brothers and make it really clear that that's not cool and that's not okay. And I think conversations like that among young people need to happen. I mean, I've heard from a student who said, it's a guy's house in UCSB, and in Isla Vista there are a lot of sort of unsanctioned fraternities, what I like to call them, just houses on DP with a lot of young men living in them. And there was this one house, and they had a poster on the wall, and it had these house rules, and they were, take out the trash, clean up your stuff, do the dishes. And one of them was, sexual harassment is not flirting. It's not the same thing. And it was cool to hear that because, again, it was that interaction between young people, that this is not okay and we need to change that from being cool and acceptable.
And I think keeping that conversation going, what we know about perpetration behaviors and what the research is telling us is that the vast majority of men are not perpetrators, and those that are being very calculative and targeting their victims and using alcohol as a weapon, and they're doing so at alarming rates, repetitive. Serial offenders is what we see. But if we have a culture of silence where men don't feel comfortable talking to other men or calling one another out or educating each other, then those serial perpetrators are just given more power to keep causing a lot of the harm.
Exactly. And it was even this week that it was reported that Robert Jennings, who is the president at Lincoln University, gave a speech to college women stating that women claimed rape because, and this is a quote, after doing whatever they did with young men, when it didn't turn out the way they wanted, they claimed they were raped.
Well, that is, frankly, an example of someone who is ignorant. And it's unfortunate that a college president would make a statement like that. We know that false accusations are extremely rare, less than 6% of the cases. And archaic attitudes just like this are symptoms of a rape culture when women don't feel safe coming forward and talking about their experiences. And frankly, I wouldn't want my daughter or any young woman I know to attend Lincoln University under that kind of leadership. And we need to call that out. That is a Neanderthal perspective, defies the facts, obviously tone deaf to what's going on in the world. And I just wanted to comment, you had said, men being men. We have to redefine what it is for a man to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
It is not manly to savagely attack a woman. It is much more manly to be involved perhaps in a seduction. Where there is mutual interest. That's when a man is a man, and we should have that conversation. Otherwise, what we end up with is women being on college campuses in unsafe conditions, and we have to look at it. This is a question of safety. My daughter, your daughters, young women's sisters, grandchildren, do we want our daughters and granddaughters and the women we know being in a situation where men being men means that they are going to be physically, the women are going to be physically assaulted? It's just not acceptable. And to have a college president talk in that fashion is just, frankly, unfortunate at the very least and inexcusable.
Yes, and I think that every woman should have the right to go to college and feel safe and not feel like they are being preyed upon or victimized by others who are there to do just that.
Exactly. And the fact that we know that perpetrators, they are serial. There are a small percentage. But silence in those circumstances is acquiescing by other men who know that their colleagues, we don't see. It's very unusual for a singular rape to occur. This is a pattern, and it is important that young men call out these perpetrators and stalkers and
young men, old men.
Absolutely.
Any men need to be the voice, need to say this is not being a man, because it needs to be heard from a male voice. For this to change, I truly believe it has to be a very strong male voice. But that is kind of my question for all of you, is that for change to happen in sexual assault prevention, it's going to take an investment on many different levels. So we're going to have many voices that come out and many voices that are heard to make an impact. What do you think that needs to happen next?
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right about engaging men on these issues. Women have been leading the charge for decades now when it comes to sexual violence, sexual assault, and creating safe spaces where men can call one another out for even maybe the simplest thing of a sexist joke, and really understanding the implications of something, how a very small, distorted thought, cognitive distortion, could really be a small piece of a much larger problematic puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Kelsey, your thoughts?
I think it's going to take a lot of different elements. I think yes means yes is another tool in the tool chest, as people like to say. I think that in my research, I started to think that this was sort of the beginning of a social movement right now where we're at. I think in speaking with some activists, one thing that they mentioned was the bystander intervention as being really, really crucial. So again, in these party environments, men and women going up to a couple, and maybe these two people appear to be very intoxicated, and a simple, is everything okay? Is everything going on there? And I mean, I am a fairly recent graduate, and I can say that that didn't happen a whole lot in my experience and in talking to people. And I think it is starting to happen, and I think that conversation is starting to be had. And I know that discussion happens in the care offices as well, that Green Dot program.
Absolutely. And it's not just necessarily, it is absolutely empowering individuals to, speak up. You see something, you say something, but it's also changing that conversation of, why wouldn't I go up and intervene? What if that was my best friend or my roommate? Would I act differently than if those are two strangers that I don't know? And really getting college students to identify the barriers for intervention, and then kind of strategies for around that. And what do I feel comfortable? What is a safe intervention strategy for me as a member of this community that wants to keep everyone safe, and really keeping safety at the forefront?
And I think also the element of consequence. There have to be consequences for this kind of behavior, so that if there's some reluctance or timidity in responding, protecting a young woman, whether it's a male stepping forward or a woman stepping forward, they recognize that their friend or their acquaintance could suffer serious consequences for this behavior, and either point that out or intervene so that it doesn't happen. Again, the whole point here is that we want women on campus to be safe. So if it means that people have to intervene, recognizing not that it's morally reprehensible, but that it's going to cost them their opportunity to get their degree, quote, ruin their lives. We see that a lot with athletes who are accused of and convicted of sexual assault. Oh, my goodness, this great football player, he's going to lose his chance to play football. We have to focus on the fact that what that person has done is hurt another person, cause them great physical and or mental harm, and that is the behavior that we need to stop. And we have to do it any way that we can do that, whether it's through interventions or consequences.
Mm-hmm. So women are out there, they're doing it, but how do we get the men's attention? Mm-hmm.
Well, again, enforcement. If you have drugged a woman at a fraternity party, or I don't want to blame fraternities exclusively. This happens, in many different elements. But if there's a party, and we heard stories at this hearing yesterday about young women who had been drugged. We know about roofies, people who put this into someone's drink, drugs into the drink. If it is found that someone has done this, then they should be expelled from school. Yes, it will have long-term, potentially lifetime consequences. Think about it before you behave that way. I think that there have to be those consequences, and the fact that you have to weigh the impacts of your behavior. I think that will get the attention of a lot of men, and I think we need to do that among many other different protocols.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes when like we talked about, this is a very few percentage of men are perpetrators, but when you're talking to the general public and when you're talking to men, you say, what if this happened to your sister? What if this happened to your mother, your girlfriend?
So bring it home.
Bring it home. And I think, and again, I think that needs to happen at a young age, at that high school level and before.
I think as a society as a whole, we're not all that well equipped to deal with perpetration, whether it's in the criminal justice system, in the prisons, out in community, in the military, on college campuses. I mean, this kind of what do we do, and the punishments, and how do we really kind of address the consequences? There's still some work to be done. We can make wonderful strides in survivor advocacy and changing legislation, but there are some conversations regarding perpetrators that just haven't quite happened yet, and they're long overdue.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that is helping is we are starting to see males on video, whether they're stars in sports or celebrities or politics, but they are starting to have a voice. And I really welcome that voice, because I do once more think that that's the only way that this is actually going to create the change instead of just talk about the change. So I want to thank all of you, all of my guests for being here. State Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, thank you. BRIANA Conway with CARE at UCSB, and KELSEY Brugger from The Independent. I really appreciate all of your insight and your expertise on this, and I thank you all for working so tirelessly in this effort. One last thing before we take our last break is that if you are a victim of sexual assault and would like to speak with an advocate, call the Rape Crisis Center at 805-564-3696 or UCSB's Care Center at 805-893-4613. I will also post this information on my website at drkimtaylorshow.com. I'll be right back after this break with my closing comments.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
It's time. It's time for society to change. It's time to create a world without sexual violence. No one is trying to curtail one's right to engage in sex with consenting partners. The point is to be more conscious, to press a pause button so that you don't cross a line and violate not only your own integrity by engaging in behaviors that you will regret, but to take away someone else's right to be a willing participant. Change is worth working toward. It's a big vision, but I believe it's possible. And it's time to take action. Men, they need to stand up and teach their boys to respect women. And women need to respect themselves and be clear about consent also. So the absence of a no does not mean yes. Only yes means yes. And getting consent, well, it's just sexy. So thank you for joining me. I hope that you will join me again next Thursday afternoon, live at 5. Don't forget to listen to the rebroadcast right here at KZSB AM 1290, Thursday evenings at 10 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. And also go to iTunes where you can download the podcast on my past programs. So I'll be here next week, and I'll talk to you then. Nobody else has to change in order for you to get better.